Hi, welcome to Art on the Brain. I'm Kelly Drake, and today I want to show you a plein air watercolor sketch that I did of this flowering plumeria tree when I was in Hawaii. Now first I like to start with a sketch with my watercolor pencils, and I'm doing this in my watercolor art journal, and so it's pretty nice watercolor paper. And I like to start out with the watercolor pencils because I can do a light sketch and know that this can be changed however I want to use it with water. And so it'll blend well into my watercolor paints when I start painting. And usually when I'm out painting something like this, especially with water and sky, I start with the blues. So here I'm starting with a cerulean blue and just doing a wet on dry wash, dark to light, to show that little bit of atmosphere, and then going in with the water. And here it's a very nice blue to green watercolor, and so I'm using a little bit of ultramarine at the top, and then going into a green that I mixed with the ultramarine, cerulean, and a little bit of olive green. Now I want to continue with the water across the surface, but as you can see, these branches are kind of in the way. So I'm going to go into a negative painting and paint in between those branches and leave the white. Now, as a beginner, I may have just painted the water all the way across and then thinking that that dark color of the branches could go over that because it was dark enough. But now I think I'd rather leave that white just in case I want a little light and shadow play on the branches and the trunk, and also so that that shape comes through without anything showing through underneath, because watercolor is transparent. Even if you mix a real dark color, some of that's going to show through and you're going to have those horizontal lines going through. And to me, the most important part of this painting are the branches and the trunk there, because they make such an interesting shape. So now before I go on, I'm just looking at these hills in the background. I try to ignore this palm tree because I just left it out of the painting. It was in the way. If you see Molokai in the background there, it's just kind of hazy color. It's not really any particular color. There's a little bit of green showing through, but I'm going to start with a warm neutral. And I think this is a good way to go with this so that it doesn't fight with everything else, and so that I can achieve that hazy effect. So I mixed a neutral out of burnt umber and ultramarine. And then as you see, I painted in a little bit darker and then I blot it once with my paper towel. And that way I get kind of a mottled effect, which I think kind of shows what it actually looks like there in reality. It doesn't look perfect and detailed because it's a little too far away and there's quite a bit of atmosphere between me and the hills. So now I'm just going over that shape of the canopy of the tree with my watercolor pencil while other things dry, and just giving myself something to go by. And just studying this, there's a lot of leaves here. There's no way I'm going to be able to paint all those leaves, and even if I did, it would just look strange. It would look more like I think like a greeting card rather than a watercolor sketch. So what I'm going to do is have kind of a hard edge to this green wash, and in some places, like on the outer edges of the canopy, I'm going to have those leaf shapes. And then as I go with more of a wet wash in between here, I'm going to leave white for the plumeria flowers that are showing through, so that, you know, even if I don't do anything else with the flowers at this point, they're going to show up as flowers. So now back to these hills, there's a little shadow that really shows you that that cloud is there up at the top of the hills. And there's shadows that show what the hills are doing. So I'm going to go in and put a little shading in back there. And I don't want this to get too strong because I don't want it to fight with my foreground. But I just mixed more of that neutral with ultramarine and burnt umber. Made it a little cooler this time, so there's a little more ultramarine in it. And I'm painting in those shadows. And even though it's way back there and it's real light, I believe these shadows are very important, and I'll come back and probably strengthen parts of those so that it really looks like there's a cloud above. Right now I'm just trying to get them blocked in there. Now also using some of that neutral to go in and put shadows in the clouds above that are just hovering over Molokai, and mixing a little bit of a warm neutral there with the same colors but a little more burnt umber, and just going in trying to put in some of that shadow. Now I really, when I looked at the hills below, I want that atmospheric perspective to be kind of more obvious, so I'm putting a little more of a wash of cerulean blue over the top. And you can do this as long as you've painted something really light in the background. You can always put a little glaze of the blue over the top to make it fall back in the painting. Now still, all the values are very similar here, so I want to add more contrast to this tree in the foreground because that is the star of this painting, and maybe even a little more detail. So I'm going in, and this is what round brushes are really great for, is that pointed tip. You can make beautiful leaf shapes, and they don't have to be perfect, but just so that you can approximate that leaf shape and get some detail in there without going too wild with it. Now just trying to go in and find things that I may have felt that I lost before with my watercolor pencil, and I strengthen that cloud, that shadow underneath the cloud, so it looks more cloud-like. Now I'm thinking I want to start on these branches or trunk, part of the trunk there of the tree. And so I'm going to need to mix a nice dark neutral color. So again, I'm going in with my burnt umber and my ultramarine and a little bit of indanthrone blue, which darkens the whole thing. And keeping it warm so that it still looks a little bit more brown like a tree trunk. And I'm going into the white that I left there for the trunk. So as you can see, I can leave a little bit of the highlights here and there so it looks like light is hitting the trunk. So I'm not just going to fill these in like a coloring book. I'm going to, while I'm looking at the tree and seeing the light hitting the tree, and everything's moving because it's a little breezy and the light changes from here to there from time to time. But I'm just going to do my best to get that lighting effect. And I'm not going to be too afraid to go up here into the tree canopy and put some of those branches up there too. Even though I didn't leave white, it's okay, they're really tiny, and I just want to make sure to make the branches extend up there so it doesn't look like they stop at the tree canopy. Now just trying to show a little bit of where each branch overlaps each other, and so I'm going to put a little bit of the darker color. I mixed a little more neutral there with my paints and made some darker color, so that I can go in and darken certain areas, leave some areas light, and just create a little more of a 3D effect there. Now, looking up at the tree canopy and also at the branches, everything's looking very cool. So I'm going to warm things up with a little yellow ochre. Yellow ochre can be a little opaque, and so I'm adding quite a bit of water to this, but just a tiny bit can go a long ways. And putting that tiny bit of yellow ochre up in the tree canopy and a little bit on the branches is making it look a little more sunny, like what it really looks like to me here as I'm sitting and looking out at the water and this beautiful plumeria tree. So that's my plumeria tree sketch, and I hope this inspires you to get out and do some watercolor plein air painting of your own. And now don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, and stop by and check out my webpage, my Facebook page, or take a look at my Instagram account if you'd like to learn more about me, my art, and my children's book illustrations.